Today, let's make a spooky spider pillow perfect for Halloween. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today we are going to be making a spooky spider pillow. I'm so excited about this. It's very flexible. So first you just need to have some sort of pillow. I'm going to be using this Christmas pillow and just adding a pillowcase to it to make it fit Halloween. So whatever pillow you're using, you're going to want some sort of cotton fabric or non-stretch fabric for both the front and the back of your pillow. So my pillow is about a half yard worth of fabric, so I'm going to be having that for the front and the back. And then you're going to want some sort of contrasting material, just a scrap amount for the spider. So this is literally probably about like 10 inches by 10 inches. I have two different spider pattern pieces available, so the whole pattern will be available in my Etsy store with code SPIDER2023. Will get you 30% off. But there is a smaller spider, which is pattern piece B, and then a larger spider, which is pattern piece A. And pattern piece A is going to be better if you are a beginner, and I would also highly recommend, if you are a beginner, to not necessarily use cotton, but to use something like felt. If you are going to be using cotton material, I would say to also have some lightweight interfacing, just to help you give it a little bit more stability for the spider itself. Next, you're going to want some sort of ribbon, about 1/4 inch in thickness. I would say probably a lot of it, so maybe 1 or 2 spools, depending on how large your pillow is. This is what we're going to be using to make our spider web for our pillowcase. So I have this really fun sparkly material, and then you're going to want 2 about 1/2 inch size buttons. Finally, you will want a zipper for the pillowcase itself. Whatever the length of your pillow is, that is the amount that you want your zipper to be. Then just your normal sewing supplies, but all of this again can be found in the pattern in my Etsy store. So let's go ahead and get started. So for our fabric, again, I'm using a half yard of material here, and I'm going to take my pillow to see, does this fit to the size of my pillow? And it looks like it does. Looks like this is going to be a good fit. I recommend when making pillowcases to add about 1.5 inches all the way around for whatever size the pillow is. That way you can make sure it fits. You could definitely make this larger or smaller though, depending on how large of a pillowcase you wanted. If you were also having your fabric folded over so that you get those 2 pieces, be sure to cut it so that you have 2 separate pieces of material like I'm doing here. And then if there's any extra fabric on any of the sides, be sure to cut those as well. You want to make sure that everything is nice and neat and lines up, and you have 2 rectangles or 2 square pieces of material depending on the size of your fabric. So as you can see here, my fabric actually has some raw edges to it. So all cotton material is like this, so I would highly recommend you prepare your edges. Now there's lots of different ways to do this. I'm going to be taking a serger and just going all around this for 1 piece of material and then repeating it for the second piece. I have a series though of videos that show you different ways to finish your fabric in case you don't have a serger. You could use pinking shears, bias tape, you could do a rolled hem, lots of different ways. You just want to make sure that, especially if you're washing this pillowcase, it doesn't start to come unraveled or anything, and finishing off your edges will allow you to do that. So as you can see, we have both of our pieces of material have now been finished off, so now it's time to cut out our spider. So I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to have whatever pattern piece I am using cut out, and I'm just going to fold this so that I get a nice fold in my fabric, so where this crease is, and I'm going to line up my spider so it is on that fold. Once I have this done, I am then just going to start pinning the spider in place. So the spider has a lot of legs, so you want to be sure that you're pinning each of those legs up. If you are a new sewer, I would highly recommend doing this using felt, as the felt's going to be a little stiffer and easier to use. I would also recommend not necessarily going for that smaller pattern piece. If you are using the smaller pattern piece, I would also recommend to do that using felt too, just because it is smaller pieces and could be harder to work around. As you can see though, I am doing the bigger spider, so once you have it cut out, there's our little dots on the pattern piece. So for both this larger pattern piece A and then the little one, and what this is for is it's for the eyes. So the way that I mark the eyes, and I find that this is a very easy way to do it, is I take a little needle and thread and I poke through wherever that eye is going to be. So I go through both layers of my fabric. I'm just going to gently bring my thread through. As you can see, I'm not bringing it all the way. I'm then just going to cut the needle off, and then I'm very carefully going to unpin all of this, and then I will open up the spider so that I can see that it is that full-size spider. Now at the top you can see that we have that little bit of thread, so that maroon. I'm just going to snip this, and now we see that we have 2 marks on either side that are symmetrical, and this is where the eyes are going to go. So just a really easy way to mark where our eyes are going to be for our spider. Now, if you are using cotton like I am, you are going to want to have some sort of interfacing just to give it a little bit more stiffness and help it be easier to when we add the applique to the fabric. So now you're just going to pin up your spider doing the exact same method that we did before, and to cut out the interfacing is cut out on the fold so that you get that nice symmetrical view of our spider, and just go through and cut out the fabric. Now for this, since it is something that we're going to be pressing, I'm using fusible interfacing, which is what I would recommend. It is now time for us to prepare everything. So I'm using my iron. If your pillowcase has any, creases in it that you want to iron out, you can do that here as well. And then it is time to add our interfacing to our spider. If you are using felt at any point during this instead of using cotton, you can skip all of these steps. You do not have to worry about applying interfacing. But if you are using cotton, you can see that the interfacing just made it a little stiffer. So now what it's time to do is figure out where you want your spider to go. So you can figure out how you want it to be laying on your fabric. I think I'm going to be putting mine at the corner. Be sure when you are placing your spider that you remember about the seam allowance for your pillow. So you don't want it to be too close to a corner, and so somewhere where you still have that nice seam allowance, but it's where you want it to be. Next, it is time to start laying out our ribbon. So for this, it's really fun. It's really whatever you would like it to be. The ribbon is going to be your spider web effect. So just cutting out the ribbon, seeing how you want it to lay out. So this whole video that I took this actually took about 10 minutes for me, just figuring out how I wanted my fabric and the spider and the ribbon to all lay together so that I had the most fun spider web effect. Once you figure out how you do want it to lay, it is then time to pin all of that ribbon down. So you can see that I am only pinning this ribbon onto one piece of material. This is the front of my pillowcase. I'm doing nothing with the back of the pillowcase. And I am now just pinning the ribbon onto the front portion of my pillowcase. Now for this, I am using a lot of pins, just making sure that the ribbon is in place, it's not bulking up anywhere. When I sew it, it's going to have a nice clean effect. So I'm going to take the spider off for now, and I'm just going to be sewing on the ribbon onto the pillowcase. Now I'm using a straight stitch. I am just going to sew as close to the edge of the ribbon as I can. So again, I'm using about that 1/4 inch thick ribbon. So I have my sewing machine all lined up. You can see that I got one done here and it looks really nice. So I just very carefully went through and sewed one side of the ribbon, and then I repeated that exact same stitching for the other side of the ribbon. So essentially having parallel stitches on all of these pieces of ribbon. Once you have that done, you will then have your spider web attached to your pillowcase. Now, the length of time this takes really depends on how many pieces of ribbon you used, how large your pillow is, and how many times you had your ribbon sort of overlapping with each other. But if you just take your time, you will be able to get through it and it will lay really nicely. So here's what my spider web currently looks like on the pillow. I love it. I really like how sparkly this ribbon is as well. It's really fun. So now what it's time to do is figure out where I want my spider. I'm going to be placing my spider more in this upper corner, and for this we are now going to be sewing it on. Now if you were using the cotton interfacing approach, we're going to be taking a zigzag stitch all the way around. If you were using felt, you can definitely just do a straight stitch to attach it. But this is a really important time to make sure that your pins are really attaching the spider to the front of your pillowcase, making sure that none of the legs are getting loose. You want to make sure it's in place. So as you can see here, I have it all set up. I'm going to be using that zigzag stitch since I am using cotton fabric. And I'm just going to very carefully take my time and sew around the spider. Now I have sped up this video since it took me quite some time to do this. This was just a very slow and simple process of really making sure the spider was attached. So now I have my spider sewed on. You can see that I use the zigzag stitches and it gives it a really fun applique feel. So what it's time to do now is to add the 2 eyes. So we have those marks where we had earlier, and we're just going to be adding our button on top of that mark. So I doubled up my thread and I am just going to be sewing the buttons on, hand sewing. I have a whole video on how to sew buttons on if that is something that you want more information, but just using a needle and thread and just sewing through those 2 holes on the button to make sure that it is really attached. If this is something that you think you're going to be washing really often, I would highly suggest doubling up on your thread just to make sure it is really tight and it is really on there. But if you see this as something that is just going to be much more of a decorative piece, you could probably get away with just your normal needle and thread, sewing it a few times to make sure that the button is secure, and then going about your way. I thought that this turned out so cute though. It was such a fun little element to add. So at this point, the front of our pillowcase is actually complete. We have the spider on, we have the spider web on. So now it is just time to actually sew our entire pillowcase, adding the zipper. So for my zipper, I'm going to be putting it on the right hand side. So I am going to be just adding my zipper. So the right side of my zipper is facing the right side of my fabric, and I'm going to pin up along this edge. Once I have it all pinned up, it will then be time to just take a seam to secure that one edge of the zipper to the one edge of my pillowcase. Doing this, you could use a zipper foot if you would like. I'm just going to be using a regular presser foot as I'm not too worried about the zipper being shown or trying to hide it in any way. I found that this was a really simple zipper to just sew up to add to the pillow, and now I'm going to repeat that exact same step for the back of my pillow. So attaching with right sides together, the back side of my pillow with the right side of the zipper, and when you pin this up along that edge, you will then see that if we open the fabric that we have a nice little zipper sandwich. So we have those two pieces of the right side of our fabric, and then we have the zipper in the middle. And again, I'm just using a regular presser foot, taking a straight seam, sewing this on so that I have my zipper attached to the rest of my pillowcase. So here's what my zipper looks like. I will not be top stitching the zipper. I don't think it necessarily needs it for this pattern, but if you would like to, you definitely can. Next, you want to unzip your zipper, so making sure that you have it open, and we are going to now be sewing the rest of our pillowcase together. It's very important though that the zipper is open, as that's how we're going to be turning all of this right side out. Once you have it open, you're just going to be matching up the rest of the edges of your pillowcase. So where that zipper is, if you have any extra space on that edge, be sure to pin that up as well. And then we are just going to now be pinning up the rest of the pillowcase, so those other three sides. So having those edges matched, just going all the way around the pillowcase, adding your pins or using quilting clips to hold all those edges together. And then when you get back up to the original portion of the zipper, you can pin that little edge if you have anything left as well. Then we're just going to be taking a straight stitch and going all the way around one continuous stitch to sew up all three of those sides, and being sure any of that zipper is hidden, we still have that zipper open. Now when you are starting, when we are working with that zipper, if you have that edge, be sure that your seam is on the left hand side of the original zipper seam. This will allow it so that any stitches that are seen for the zipper are hidden, and it'll give you a much cleaner finish. Now I'm just going to take though a straight stitch all the way through, really just taking my time, making sure that I'm getting all the fabric and sewing up my pillow. And then similar to any large stitch that you're doing like this, be sure that you're back stitching at the beginning and the end so that you have that really nice and secure stitch, especially when it comes time for us to turn it right side out. So once everything is done, you can trim off any extra threads that you have, make sure that you're poking out the corners, and we are now just going to turn this. So here's what our pillowcase looks like. It turned out so cute. I love how the spider pattern looks on the front and the little spider. So I'm going to fully open my zipper, if your zipper is not all the way fully open, and then just add my pillow. So here is what our pillowcase is done. It looks so fun. It's perfect for Halloween. I think that the fabric and the ribbon and the spider look good. You have the zipper on the outside, so this is really easy to store, really easy to take on and off. You're not making an entirely new pillow. You can just reuse a pillow you already have. Remember, there is a whole Etsy pattern available for this, so check out the link in the description box if you would like to get that, if you want more information. I hope you have a really fun and spooky Halloween. Thanks for watching.